In this video, we'll be taking a look at this beautiful llama, but also we'll be doing some questions on the topic of joints, muscle, and movement. So let's just get into it. What is the main role of nerves in human movement? So let's get to this diagram. Here we have a man, a really strong guy, right? We know he's got a brain, just like every other human. A brain is the control center of your body. Your brain tells your body what to do. So we know we have this nerve cell coming from your brain, and a decision is made in his brain. He decides to contract his leg muscle. So he sends this signal via this neuron. This neuron is attached to a muscle fiber or a muscle cell, so this thing right here. Now this signal will transfer down these little holes called T-tubules, and as it transfers down these T-tubules, the signal will be transferred to this blue thing called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Once this signal arrives at this blue structure, calcium will be released. When calcium is released, the calcium will surround, you can see this blue structure surrounds these things, these little contractile units called myofibrils. So when the calcium is released, it will essentially travel along these myofibrils. And calcium is very important to initiate the process of muscle contraction. The calcium is absolutely necessary to cause this myofibril to contract. And when all these myofibrils contract, when calcium arrives, then the muscle fiber will get shorter, and then thus the whole muscle will get shorter and contract. Okay? So that's the purpose of a nerve cell. It stimulates muscle fibers to contract, or muscle to contract. So what would the answer be? So based on this, we know the answer should be D, to stimulate muscle contraction. Why not A? Because A is the exact opposite of contraction. We know nerves cause contraction, not stretching. Stretching is like relaxing, right? So nerves don't cause relaxation, it causes contraction. Therefore, it has to be D. Okay, it cannot be B because joints are stationary. Joints don't move. Joints is a place where two bones meet. A joint can't move. It's solitary. It's stationary. Okay, so nerves don't have anything to do with joints. To transport pain signals that indicate muscle injuries. Okay, so this one is a bit tricky because we know when we hurt our muscle that we can feel it, right? So why would it not be C then? Because there are two kinds of nerves. Nerves for human movement and nerves for human pain sensation. Okay, so this question is asking specifically about human movement, so it's got to be D. If this question asks about nerves and human sensation or human feeling, then C might be correct. Okay, so the reason why it's not C is because the question is asking about human movement, not human sensation. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Which process is part of the mechanism that controls muscle contraction? Okay, so this is a tricky question. So first I'll quickly go on to explain something. So we know, like I just mentioned, when calcium arrives around the myofibrils, what happens is, so here we have a myofibril, we have one sarcomere, one Z line to one Z line. So this is one single sarcomere, okay? Because we can see here, a myofibril is made up of many, it's really long. So this is only a small segment of a muscle cell. A muscle cell is really long, so a myofibril will be really long and have many units. So we're looking at one sarcomere here. And then here, we will look now at this small area of the sarcomere to see how contraction happens. So, when this calcium arrives, that I just mentioned, it will bind. So normally, this myosin heads, so this is myosin, and this is actin. Okay, so when normally myosin heads try to bind here, to pull on it, to make contraction. But normally, this actin is being blocked by troponin and tropomyosin, okay? This black and this blue thing. But when you signal your muscle to contract, calcium will be released, as I just said, and bind to this troponin. When this troponin is bound to by calcium, the troponin will cause the tropomyosin to move out of the way, okay? Just like this. So when the troponin moves out of the way, now this myosin head can bind. And when it binds, it will cause a sliding, it behaves like a little hand. So when it binds, now that the space is open, it will slide and move the thing like this. Okay, it will drag it. So what will happen basically is the whole muscle will get shorter. So if all of these myosin heads do that, the whole muscle will contract and get shorter, just like this. Okay, so this is the basics of muscle contraction. Okay, so what answer would be correct? The answer would be D. Calcium frees actin filaments for myosin heads to attach. That is true. The calcium bound to the troponin to cause the tropomyosin to move out of the way. This means the actin was freed. The actin was made available now, because now the actin is exposed, whereas before it was covered. So calcium will cause the actin filaments to be exposed. Now that it's exposed, these myosin heads can attach and cause muscle contraction. So D is the correct answer. Why are the rest not correct? So let's go with A. Troponin enables actin heads to attach to ATP and slide along myosin. So troponin does not have anything to do with ATP, okay? All that troponin does is it waits for calcium to bind to it, and then it will move tropomyosin out of the way, okay? So it's got nothing to do with ATP. What about B? Myosin heads attach to troponin, and tropomyosin pulls on actin filaments. So myosin heads, like I said, attach to actin. These myosin heads will attach to the actin, this structure, nothing else. So therefore, this one can't be right, because they're saying myosin heads attach to troponin. No, calcium attaches to troponin. So therefore, A and B cannot be correct. Now, last one, C. Tropomyosin attached to calcium. Nope, troponin attaches to calcium. That's why this one is incorrect as well. So this is really a tough question, because this is really about the specific mechanism. This is what is typically the hardest to understand. What is the difference? Okay, now we should be getting to a bit easier ones. So what is the difference between movement of the knee joint and the hip joint? Okay, let's look. The knee only allows flexion, whereas the hip allows flexion and extension. Okay, so basically, flexion in general is the process of bending your limb. So bringing it closer to your body. So when you flex your arm, you bring your forearm closer to your body. When you flex your knee, you bring your shins closer to your body. And extension is the opposite, so taking it away from your body. Okay, so do you think your knee can only do flexion? No, because you can flex your knee and bring your leg closer to your body, but you can also extend your knee and make your leg straight, right? So this one can't be correct, because your knee can both be flexed and extended, okay? Not only flexion. And of course, your hip can flex and extend, because think about it. Try and bring your knee up to your chest. Sit there and try and do that now. When you do that, you notice you're bringing your knee towards your chest. That is hip flexion, because you're flexing the joint at your hip. Okay, and extension would just be bringing it down to the floor. So this one is incorrect, because the knee can do both as well. Now what about B? The knee allows more rotation than the hip. Okay, so we know your knee is like a hinge joint. A hinge joint is like a joint on your door. Your door can only move in one direction, open or closed. It can't move up and down or anything like that. So your knee is the same way. It can only flex and extend. It can't move sideways or anything like that. It can only move in one direction, okay? Forward and backward, extend and flex. So, whereas your hip can do many things. You can move your knee up, sideways, you can rotate it, your hip can do a lot more movements, right? So B would not be correct, because your knee is not more flexible, or your knee cannot rotate more than your hip. So B is also incorrect. Okay, the knee is used to walk forwards, whereas the hip is used for running around corners. Okay, so this is a weird one. Your knee is not necessarily used just to walk forward. You need your knee to walk backwards, to walk sideways, to walk any direction. And the same for your hip. You need your whole body to make this movement happen. Your knee is not meant for a specific purpose, and your hip is not meant for one purpose. Your whole body works together to make a complicated movement. So to run around corners, you need your whole body. Your knee joint, your arm joints, everything. So no specific joint is made for such a specific movement or such a specific purpose. That's why C is also incorrect. The knee allows movement in one plane, whereas hip allows movement in 3 planes. So one plane is essentially one sort of direction. So your knee, we know, can extend and flex, so it can move in one line, okay? So this is true. It can't make any other movements, only straight and back. So one plane. That's what they mean by plane. whereas hip allows movement in 3 planes. So that's true. Your hip can move forward and backward, so that's 1 plane, side to side, that's 2 planes, and it can even move in circles. So you can rotate your hip in a circle. You can sit there and try and move your leg in a circle. That's possible, right? So this means your hip can move in 3 planes. So your hip has much more flexibility, much more movements than your knee. So that's why D would be correct. Now, what is the role? By the way, you can see it's kind of interesting. These questions typically all are 38 or 37. They're all around the same number, except for this one. This one's weird. But they're all really the same number. Even this one's 39. That's because these questions, the IB is predictable and they always put their questions at the same place in an exam. So you will always get questions related to body and movement and muscles at around the 36, 37, or 38 mark, okay? Their tests are always organized in the same way. Okay, what is the role of cartilage in elbow joint? Okay, wait a second. Okay, so here we have an elbow joint. So it's basically representing this arm, okay? So we can see the humerus, which is this, and then the 2 forearm bones. And we can see this blue structure. This blue structure is called cartilage. What the purpose of cartilage is to reduce friction, to make a smooth movement. Without cartilage, your bones would rub directly against each other. Imagine rubbing 2 bricks against each other. There's a lot of friction, it would make a lot of noise, it'd make it really difficult to move, you'd have to have a lot more power, and it would just hurt. And eventually you'll have no bone left. Because if you keep rubbing bricks together, eventually they erode away. So the purpose of cartilage is to be on the end of these bones at the joints, and they're basically very slippery and soft. So when the bones move past each other, this cartilage can rub against each other instead of the bone. And cartilage is very soft and slippery, so you can make smooth movements without pain. That's the purpose of cartilage. Synovial fluid, by the way, is this fluid inside here. And it is not made by cartilage. It's made by the bone. It's made by other things, okay? Not by the bone. Not by the cartilage. So, and it has a similar purpose. Synovial fluid is also for smooth movement. It basically does a similar job to cartilage. So, A, allows easy movement between the bones. Yep, that seems to be the right answer already. So, wait, let me move this to front. So I'd say this is the answer so far, but let's check the rest. Secrete synovial fluid. Nope. I told you cartilage does not secrete synovial fluid. Other cells on your bones do that. Connects tricep muscle to forearm bones. Okay, so we talked about this before. The way muscles are connected to bones is by tendons. Okay, so let me show you. Here's a muscle. You can see this is the muscle, and these 2 things here are called tendons. The tendons connect the muscle. It's like a kind of tape. It connects the muscle to the bone. So that's what it's called. Tendons do that. Tendons connect muscle to bone, so not cartilage. So that's why C is incorrect. Okay. Prevents dislocation of humerus from forearm bones. No. Nope. We know all it does is it makes smooth movement. This structure does not have any purpose in preventing dislocation. Dislocation meaning these bones slip out of the socket. They basically move apart from one another. I'd say a structure that helps to prevent dislocation would be ligaments. So ligaments is like this structure. They connect bones to bones. Without ligaments, your bones would just go out of place. Okay, so cartilage doesn't prevent dislocation, rather ligaments, and maybe your muscles can support that. Maybe your muscles can strengthen the joint, but definitely not cartilage. So therefore it must be A. Okay, one last question. What changes will occur when the muscle fiber contracts? Okay, so let's go here. I explained this here quite clearly. So here we have a myofibril and we have sarcomeres, okay? So this is one sarcomere and this is another sarcomere. The dark band is the band that has myosin. Myosin is this green one. The light band is the place wherever there's not myosin. Okay, so for example, this would be a dark band. This right here. Because that's the whole area that has myosin. The light band would be this area where there's no myosin. So what do you think happens during contraction to the dark and the light band? What happens to them? So notice this. When you contract, look how long the dark band is right now. Now when you contract, oh yeah, I gotta do it somewhere else. I'm gonna do it here. when you contract, right, what happened to the dark band? It stayed exactly the same. It's still from here to here. So the dark band doesn't change shape. Now what happened to the light band? So here we're relaxed. So this is the light band wherever there's no green, wherever there's no myosin. When you contract, it gets smaller, right? So before, there was a lot of space. But now, there's only this small area. So the light band gets smaller, okay? So during contraction, the dark band stays the same and the light band gets smaller. And the filaments, so the myosin and the actin filaments, they stay the same length. So during contraction, all that's happening is they slide past each other, but they don't change length. These filaments still remain the same length. So overall, during contraction, the light band gets smaller, the dark band stays the same length, the filaments stay the same length, and the sarcomere gets smaller. So the sarcomere is this whole unit from blue to blue. It gets smaller from Z line to Z line. So what would the answer be here? What do you think? The dark band will decrease? No. The dark band, as I just said, stays the same length. The light band will decrease. Yes, that's true. As it contracts, the light band gets smaller or shorter. The light band and dark band will both decrease. Nope. Dark band stays the same. The Z lines will decrease. The Z lines stay the same length, right? This is a Z line. Does anything happen to the Z line as you contract? No. It's still this long. But the sarcomere gets smaller though, but not the Z lines. The Z lines are the same length. So therefore the answer will be B. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'll make sure to make other questions, another video on some more questions, but that's it for this one.